Samurai 8, Chapter 6, Oh Faithful Samurai. So this was a fine chapter. A lot of exposition in this one. A whole new element of the story has been introduced, so I'm going to try to break this down and get through it as best as I can, so let's just see what happens. So we're seeing another function of the key, and they can act as a projector for information, and that's kind of cool. I suppose this is a useful storytelling device that Kishimoto can use from time to time here, but we're also being introduced to the princess element of the story. And I was a little thrown off by this at first, but I guess I'm on board with it after it was fully explained, but I'm going to stay tentative for now until it's fully fleshed out in the next coming chapters. And I suppose this is Kishimoto trying to improve the female dynamic of characters in his series, coming off of Naruto and everything. So, we'll see what happens after this. I just hope it doesn't fall apart. So we're also seeing Hachimaru using his soul for the first time, at least I think so, and as expected, it didn't really work out, and I'm glad that it didn't. It would have kind of been anticlimactic if Hachimaru was just perfectly able to activate his sword, the way that Daruma does, since there'd be little left to no growth for him to achieve other than just power-ups after this point. And I like that Daruma is establishing that while Hachimaru is a samurai, he's not really that powerful or all of that fleshed out, and there's still a lot of room for him to grow. Because for a shonen main character in the 6th chapter of their series, Hachimaru is rather powerful, and I'm just comparing him to the other, shonen main characters of series that I have read in the beginning, and I'm not saying anything against it or anything. It's fine. It's just the way that the power scale is in this series so far. But I just like that, they've established that he's powerful, but now he needs to refine it. And before he can move any further, he needs to learn the basics. Yes, he can easily cut that tank in half, the way that we saw in back in chapter 2, I think it was. But that's, that's fodder stuff, more or less. If he were to go against one of the samurais that we see later on in this chapter, he would get low diff, no problem. And I suppose we're getting introduced to Hachimaru's first real goal, and he just wants his father to acknowledge him as being strong. And I suppose that this is going to happen because Hachimaru says that he will start his space odyssey after he achieves this. And we know that this is the big overarching plot of the story. Hachimaru eventually is going to go into space to get the other keys and whatnot. So I guess this is his first goal. Maybe this will be the end of this first arc, like him getting the acknowledgement from his father, and then they, leave on good terms, and then he goes out into space, and then we could start, the real series at that part, I suppose. So now let's talk about the super interesting part of this chapter, and of course I'm talking about the princess and her congregation of samurais. So it cuts to this gigantic spaceship that seems to be hovering over a planet, possibly, and I'm going to assume that this is what a holder looks like at the highest level, because we saw that holders don't necessarily have to be small, like companions like Hayataro and the one that Daruma stole from Ronin. We saw that they could be those huge, gigantic Cyclop dudes, and we also saw like that sea turtle spaceship, in the beginning of the series, and I assumed that that was a holder too, and I guess that this spaceship could also be implied to be a holder. Maybe it's not a holder, maybe it's like a different class of holders, but I think there's more to this thing than just simply being like a vessel for travel. It also has those like shield things floating around it, which is reminiscent of what Daruma did in the previous chapter with his holder. So I'm going to assume that this is like the god tier holder, I suppose, maybe, or at least one of them. So it cuts to inside of the spaceship, and we see like this round table of samurais with the princess sitting on top and the main samurai sitting beneath her, I suppose. And this is really what I've been waiting for in this story, like to get into the meat of it, let's start getting introduced to the really powerful characters, like the characters that are going to be prevalent throughout the series, because they're always going to be around because they're so powerful that they're not really going to be major players to at least like the characters that we're emotionally attached to until the end. Talking about like the Hashiramas, the Madaras, the characters like that, and that's what they seem like these characters are in the tier of, or maybe they're not, it just seems like that right now. So, this is like the gotei 13, or at least one of the gotei 13s of Bleach. That's what it seems like. Like, all of these samurai surrounding them, I suppose, are significant in their own right. And then, of course, the one sitting in the middle with the 4 swords, which I'll get into later. Got a lot to talk about this guy. He's probably like the Yamamoto of the Gotei 13 here. And then above him is the princess, who, I don't know, is like the Soul King or one of the Soul Kings. I'm sorry if you're not familiar with Bleach, but this is the only thing I can really liken it to right now. So this princess, Sahime, I suppose that's her name, is the first that we're being introduced to, and probably is going to be one of the most significant of them, I suppose. But it's pretty interesting because it's not what I thought it was going to be, and that's why I said I was on board with the princess concept after it was fully established, because this doesn't seem like, you know, a damsel in distress. She's almost like reminding me of what Kaguya was like from Naruto. She's almost like an Osatsuki. It also is establishing that she has some kind of clairvoyant power, how she's able to, like, see out into the universe and just observe things, especially if they're connected to the samurais. So I guess she's kind of like the three-eyed raven in that sense. Sorry if I keep comparing things to other established lore that is out in the world. Look, that's all I really have to go off of to make sense of things. So if you're getting annoyed with it, I understand, but hey, it's all I really got at this point. So using these clairvoyant powers, she reveals that she's aware of the existence of Hachimaru and that he has become a samurai. And not only that, but he became a samurai using the star crystal that belonged to the Ronin from the first chapter. But that leads us to another interesting reveal here, and it's that the Ronin is affiliated with these people, and that he is the youngest of them. I suppose youngest of the Gotei 13 roundtable that we see here, possibly. But that's also explaining why he wasn't really that powerful, and how he more or less got mid-diffed by Hachimaru. So I guess that clears things up. But also, the Hachimaru reminds the princess of the samurai that she's with. And let me just mention, we don't get this guy's name. We hardly get any information on this dude. But I want to talk about this dude because there's significance to him. At least I think there is. So, if we go back to chapter 4, when we see that flashback that Hachimaru's dad has of that samurai who's like, I'll find you, I always assumed that that was Takazuna. The vampire, you know, the soul that he was hiding inside of Hachimaru. I still think that is the case. But I think that this guy might be Takazuna, the vampire, because they both have the same kind of eyes. Like, go back to chapter 4 and look at that panel again. The Takazuna, his right eye is like, I don't know, gone, missing, milky, whatever you want to call it, but then his left eye is normal. And it's the same exact thing with this guy. However, the flashback of Takazuna, he had a samurai mask on. So we didn't see the rest of his face. We only got to see his eyes. But they're more or less matching up here. So I'm assuming that this is that guy. And it all makes the more sense because it's tying in to the story of, you know, Hachimaru's dad. And Hachimaru's dad allegedly stealing the soul from this dude. And now he has motivation to go after Hachimaru. So before I move on from this guy, I just want to put one more theory out there. And let me just say, this is a wild theory. It's just a shot in the dark, but I'm getting the vibe that Takazuna, this samurai guy that we see here below the princess, it's possible that he's related to Hachimaru's dad. Because they just seem to look similar. Like, they kind of have the same nose and the same kind of facial hair. So it's possible that Hachimaru's dad may have been a part of this Gotei 13. Maybe he was formerly a samurai, or maybe he wasn't a samurai, maybe he didn't want to become one, or maybe he was like the weaker brother of this guy, or maybe he's his son, maybe this is Hachimaru's dad's dad, maybe this is Hachimaru's grandfather. Something like that is happening here, and maybe they had some kind of falling out. I originally thought that Hachimaru's dad was some kind of samurai part dealer. Maybe he is too, but maybe he's also related to this character. So much to speculate here, and it is kind of fun, you know, thinking about all the possibilities, but I just wanted to put it out there. There are aesthetic similarities to them, at least in my opinion. So then we're introduced to what I suppose is the love interest of this story, and it is Anne, and she's a cool character. I like her. She's not too much like Hinata for me to be thrown off by her, but there are some kind of similarities there, but not exactly. I hope that she turns out to be a stronger female character. Not that I personally need it. I just think it would be better for the story overall. I also like that she's kind of similar to Hachimaru. She also kind of has like a similar face to him. But I like that it's not going to be like the opposite, conflicting personalities here, so we don't have to really deal with that. I mean, I'm sure that they will have conflict once they eventually meet, because it's already established in here that she doesn't like when people interrupt her, and we already saw that Hachimaru was interrupting Daruma in like the whole beginning of this chapter, so that's definitely going to come to fruition eventually, but I think more or less they're going to get along. So then we get more information on the princesses, and apparently they are the only people capable of sensing and finding the locker balls, which are apparently buried deep in the planet's core. So that's going to be a whole other thing going down there, because if these cores are similar to Earth's core, it's nearly impossible to go down there without being melted like within 30 miles of getting close to it. But I'm sure that samurais can somehow withstand the temperatures. I mean, if they can survive in a vacuum, I'm sure they can withstand the temperatures here, but that's long into the story before we probably get to that point. But I just wanted to put that out there. But this is further expanding upon that clairvoyance that was talked about earlier with the other big princess that we saw. And I guess princesses are like special beings. Like, I don't think anyone can become a princess. It seems like you might be born that way. Like, you're kind of just born with the power, or you're not born with it, or it could be learned. It's not made too clear here, but it just seems like once it's discovered that they have the potential to be a princess, then after that they're groomed into being one, because that's kind of just how it has to be. Like, a princess has to become a princess, a samurai has to become a samurai, and then they eventually have to meet and then work together, I guess. But it's also kind of establishing that samurais can't exist without princesses, because Daruma says that only a princess can manufacture the forces needed to protect the planet, which is talking about the star crystal here, and the star crystal is needed in order to create a samurai. So, like, princesses are super integral to this world, and I guess samurais are indebted to them in one way or another. So the chapter ends with us seeing them both side by side in the final panel of this chapter, and that's pretty cool. I like where it's headed, but I think a cool dynamic for the princess and the samurai, or more so Anne and Hachimaru to have, is kind of like the female and the male lead in like a Final Fantasy game, where the female isn't useless. She is very integral to the party, and she's very powerful in her own right, but she supports him in like a defensive way. Like, she buffs him, or it creates just an advantage for him to win, as where he's more of like the muscle, he's like the offensive. Because I'd really like to see them work together and have these epic battles. I think that would be a refreshing take on things. If you guys are familiar with One Piece, think back to the beginning of Whole Cake Island when Nami was helping Luffy fight Cracker. Something like that, but just like all the time. I think that would be awesome. So that's pretty much it for the video, but one more thing I want to touch on is the last bit of side text that we get at the end of this chapter says that there's going to be a color centerfold in the next chapter in response to the series' popularity. So that's cool. That's nice to hear that it's doing pretty well for itself in Japan, at least. I can't say the same for its Western response, but maybe in time it'll get there. But if you liked the video, please give it a like and let me know what you think about the princess. Let me know what you think about all of this stuff. And do you think that samurai we saw was Takazuna, or do you even think Takazuna was the original guy that I was talking about from Chapter 4? Let me know. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. I also have a Patreon. It gives you access to a weekly Q&A that I do on this channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.